Thank you for joining me for another agonizing session of going through Kent Hovind's doctoral dissertation. Before we do that, I just want to highlight a few comments that you guys put down that I thought were either really funny or insightful. In real time, while I was reading the thesis, I wondered, do you have to get a master's in something before you get a PhD in something? There are a few comments on that. Chicken Hunter 08 said, PhD here. Also, I do peer reviews for article publications. This would get an automatic rejection from the introduction all on its own. I wouldn't even finish reading it. Xander Van Horn said, you don't need a PhD. You can get a PhD without having a master's. This person's a pharmacist. I actually know a few pharmacists, so I did know that. I should have known that. Chicken Hunter has a PhD. We know that. And they said you can get a PhD in science fields without a master's. It might depend. For some, maybe you have to, but maybe it's kind of like the bar. You don't even have to go to law school. If you can pass the bar, you can be a lawyer. John 16:25 said, at Liberty Bible University, our beautiful double-wide campus is complete with a garden hose spigot outside. Ask Peggy for a key to use the restroom. I saw several people comment something like this, including Dr. Dave here, that Kent just had a series of like VHS tapes that he made a long time ago, transcribed word for word by somebody else. That's why it's so awkward, and it doesn't actually contain a title, and the structure of it is just so much unlike an actual paper. And I mean, that just proves how fraudulent that university is, that they would accept something like that. Like I said 1,000 times, it's literally an incomplete work because he says so many things that are never fleshed out. And the thing I said about Nimrod, I was way off base. This did jog my memory when I read it. Apparently Bugs Bunny sarcastically said it about Elmer Fudd, and people just not knowing their Bibles very well thought that it just sounded like you're calling somebody stupid. Funny thing about that, there's a word called bituminous, and bituminous just bitumen is like crude oil. So if a rock or coal is really rich with it, bituminous is an adjective you can use for it. So I just think that's because nobody knows that word. And I've never actually done this, but I've always had the idea that, like, if I was arguing with somebody, I would just say, you are being incredibly bituminous, because it sounds like a pejorative term, doesn't it? Another fun fact, I saw some polling. I can't remember where I saw this from, but something like 1/3 of American Christians can't name the 4 Gospels. So this idea that people confused Nimrod and numbskull or whatever, or they didn't realize that Nimrod was a person, isn't surprising. Last thing before we get started, some people brought up that I'm by no means the first person to do this. And I was kind of aware of that because I typed this into YouTube before I did this, because I didn't want to be the 100th person to do this or whatever. And I did see that Dr. Dino and some other accounts have done this. But from what I can see, I saw some videos that were multiple hours long, but they did not go through the entire thing. I am going through the entire thing, except for like the introductory page where Kent just like thanks a few people or whatever. So, I mean, I'm not going to claim that I am the first person to matter-of-factly go through the entire thing, but I haven't seen it yet. So good for me.
Let's go on in the who's who in the evolutionary hall.
Yep, once again, we have to pause after like 2 seconds. I'll try not to make this comment again because I did so many times last time. But that sentence in a thesis, let's go on in the who's who in the evolutionary hall. Oh, man.
We will continue in chronological order by their birth dates, because the tangled web becomes rather difficult to decipher. Each of these men were working with
What is the purpose of that sentence existing? That did nothing to help us understand what's going on at all.
each other or near each other. Sometimes they were not aware of others working in the same field. Sometimes they were very close companions. The next man we come to is Alfred Russel Wallace. He was born in 1823 and died in 1913. He was a contemporary with Darwin. He came up with several theories such as the survival of the fittest. This was used by the capitalists in the 1800s to justify the annihilation of anyone who did not fit in. For instance, Rockefeller...
Uh-oh. Is Kent anti-capitalist? He spent so much time railing against communists last time. I once saw him in like one of his dumb little live streams he was doing in his office. He brought up CNN and he called it the Communist News Network. So I don't know.
Carnegie and some of those early tycoons were ruthless in their business practices because they based their business practices on evolution.
What?
They said only the fittest can survive, so we will be the strongest and take over. With Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company, the way they used to monopolize the market was by buying out all of the stations in a particular town. Any stations that refused to sell were literally driven out of business. For instance, if the price of gasoline was 20 cents a gallon, Rockefeller would instruct his people to sell it for 15 cents a gallon for a few months, just long enough to put the competitor out of business. When the other station would go out of business, he would have a corner on the market and jack his prices back up. The idea of evolution actually had its modern beginning with Wallace. Darwin is given the credit for it, but Wallace actually published his book first, nearly a year earlier. He emphasized a struggle for existence, the survival of the fittest, and natural selection. Wallace had very little education. He served at an apprenticeship for a while. He read Thomas Paine's book, The Age of Reason, as a teenager and became very skeptical in matters of religion. He blended right in with ideas of socialism, Marxism, and anarchism. He was heavily influenced by Malthus's book, and he believed in spiritism and the occult.
This should be many different paragraphs, but okay, the idea that the Rockefellers and the Carnegies modeled their business after evolution, that is not what survival of the fittest means at all. This is 9th grade level biology. Fittest doesn't mean the strongest survive. It means those that are best fit for their environment survive. You can be a population of organisms that have very small numbers, like Texas cave salamanders or whatever. That doesn't make you unsuccessful. It doesn't get you on the endangered species list. There are species we know that have very few of them in number, but they're not considered endangered because that is just naturally how many of them there are, and they're not directly impacted by human activity. Nobody should be surprised that Kent doesn't know what words mean, but I'm just pointing it out here. But yeah, there's nothing about, if you think that that capitalism is structured after evolution because of that, that's just false. But then again, so we should be communists, or I don't get it. This is what hardcore Marxists, who I think are just so utterly cringe, they say those same types of things, that we need to abolish capitalism because it's inherently exploitative and ruthless and all this other stuff, which there are nuggets of truth in that, but still. You could make the argument that some of these tycoon people or whatever kind of, maybe they were social Darwinists in a way, but we've been over this. That is a perversion of evolution. It's not Darwinian in any sense. Darwinian natural selection does not work the way social Darwinism is proposed to work. You cannot get rid of certain conditions or behaviors by banning people that have them from reproducing. It's kind of like if every gay person on the planet died, would that mean homosexuality would stop existing? No, because as the right-wing edgelord meme people like to say, oh, hey, during Pride Month, don't forget to remember to thank a straight couple for giving birth to you, or whatever. In his book, The World of Life, Wallace discussed his belief in a guiding intelligence behind the natural world, which can be seen as an inclination towards pantheism, or at least some form of spiritual naturalism. So Kent is going to say that somebody that's completely secular and agnostic, maybe even atheistic, but thinks that nature can, produce and create wonderful things, and that there's that Einstein is misquoted. A lot of people say he actually did believe in God, because he would say things like God doesn't play dice with the universe, and some other quotes where Einstein just says things which we don't understand, he called godly. He invoked that type of mysticism or whatever. Or, there's Baruch Spinoza, who thought God and nature were synonymous. So Kent will just call anybody a pantheist who doesn't believe what he believes. That's plainly obvious. Wallace and Darwin, they did have some significant differences. Wallace didn't really think that evolution could explain human intelligence and rationality. He thought it kind of sort of didn't apply to humans. In terms of where Wallace thinks humans came from, he wasn't a creationist for humans and a naturalist for everything else or anything like that. But that was kind of their biggest divide. Darwin was very much, nope, we can explain everything about humans with evolution. Or, he was committed to the idea that you could.
Kind of split over the idea of whether there was really a God. Because of Wallace's spiritist, pantheist, and occultist teaching of evolution, he could really be considered the founding father of the New Age movement. He lived in Malaysia for about 8 years and watched the spiritist rituals that those people performed. He developed many of his theories in that setting. The New Age movement is nothing more than the old rebellion against God and the belief in evolution, with a little Hindu and Buddhist religion mixed in with it. Let's continue our journey through the history of evolution. The next man we come to is Thomas Huxley. He was born in 1825 and died in 1895. Huxley was called Darwin's bulldog. He actively promoted Darwin's work after his publication of Origin.
Yeah, he really said very little about Darwin. I mean, it looks like there's more paragraphs about Lamarck from last time than there's about Darwin, and then he goes into Karl Marx or whatever.
Species. He was very strong in his beliefs and anxious for Christianity to be overthrown. Thomas Huxley did not claim to be an atheist. He claimed to be an agnostic. He is the one that actually made up the term agnostic. He said that if there is a God, it doesn't matter. God had no part in his life. He was an English biologist and a writer. He taught that ethics and morals had also evolved. He even wrote a book in the 1800s called Evolution and Ethics. He was very much a racist. Evolution lends itself readily to racism, which can be seen by the following quotes from Darwin and Huxley at some future period, not very distant as. Measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. At the same time, the anthropomorphous apes will no doubt be exterminated. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be wider, for it will intervene between man in a more civilized state, as we may hope, even than the Caucasian and some ape as low as a baboon, instead of as now between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla.
So I've heard this quote so many times. What Darwin is explaining here is what he thinks will happen in the future. It's descriptive. It is not prescriptive. He's not endorsing this. He was a staunch abolitionist. Yes, he was racist, but much more so than the average person of today. The average person back then was very racist. I would say he was less so than the average person back then, but still unacceptable by today's standards. 19th century writing is almost impossible to read. If you've never read the Emancipation Proclamation, it's like you should try to read it. It's so unbearable. So what he's saying here is in the future, he predicts that human civilization, the progress of technological advances, whatever, in humans, will make it so that the difference between humans in the future will be much wider than the gulf between humans and baboons currently is. And then his additional comment, this is extremely disturbing, but he says it'll also be greater than the gap between, I'm not even going to say it, and gorillas, implying that the difference between Caucasians and baboons is greater than the difference between them and gorillas. That is really disgusting, obviously. But Darwin thought that humans came all out of Africa. He would have thought that the term Aboriginal was very often used for people that lived in Africa as well. So you may see that term. It doesn't mean Australian. But so he did not think that white people evolved in Europe or or like somewhere kind of like more biblical, like near the Middle East or whatever. And then other groups of people evolved differently on different continents. He did not think that, which a lot of racist people have thought. Funny enough, Kent has, you could argue this is deeply racist, because Kent has to believe that humans came from the Fertile Crescent, because that's where it says the Garden of Eden was. And I've seen explanations of them trying to deny that we come out of Africa that really do sound actually pretty racist when they try to make their argument.
The Descent of Man, A.L. Burt Company, 1874, p. 178. No rational man, cognizant of the facts, believes that the average Negro is the equal, still less the superior, of the white man. And if this be true, it is simply incredible that when all his disabilities are removed, and our prognathous relative has a fair field and no favor, as well as no oppressor, he will be able to compete successfully with his bigger-brained and smaller-jawed rival in a contest which is to be carried on by thoughts and not by bites.
It doesn't say, but this is from Thomas Henry Huxley. I'm not going to defend it. I'm not going to put it in its own time and place. It's indefensible. You can... What's really annoying is when you try to explain something, people think that you're excusing it. That's not the case, but I'm also just not going to do that. Now, what I will say is this quote says nothing about whether or not evolution is true, and it says nothing about whether or not we should, like, even if evolution were true, is this quote so bad that we should distance ourselves from evolution? No, that's completely stupid. But, you know, we can cherry pick, like, is there racism in Christianity? Obviously. So, for example, Hugh Davis in 1630 received the earliest recorded punishment in the colonies for, quote, lying with a Negro, unquote. Davis was soundly whipped before an assembly of Negroes and others for abusing himself to the dishonor of God and the shame of Christians by defiling his body in lying with a Negro, which fault he is to acknowledge next Sabbath day. So, time to abandon Christianity?
Darwin's notion that the various races were at different evolutionary distances from the ape, with Negroes at the bottom and Caucasian at the top, was not unique to him, but rather was almost universal among the evolutionary scientists of the 19th century. Notice Huxley's argument that blacks could not compete intellectually with the Caucasians under equal and fair conditions. Racism started, or was greatly enhanced by Darwin and Thomas Huxley.
Started with Darwin and Huxley. That's just unthinkable. And the idea that it was greatly enhanced by them. They were saying things that all kinds of people said back then. That's just so insane. You know what's funny? Well, it's not funny, but it's ironic. That's what I mean by funny. The guy that wrote the tune Amazing Grace, he was in the slave trade, and then he himself got shipwrecked or marooned, I don't remember which one, and he ended up being sold himself into slavery, lived in bondage for, it was at least a few years, I believe. And then when he got out, he converted to Christianity and had a change of heart and became an abolitionist. No, just kidding. He did convert to Christianity, but he went back into the slave trade. And then much later in life, he did write like sermons and whatever. He basically became an abolitionist, but he converted to Christianity and then continued the slave trade. I mean, it's so hypocritical. But anyways, I'll just say it again. Darwin and these guys were not unique in their racism. I wouldn't say, maybe they had like unique perspectives. You could argue that, but they weren't uniquely more racist than the typical person back then was. And they certainly didn't advance racism, because evolution has one public, well, I wouldn't say it's one necessarily, but it has been winning battles in the space of like politics and public opinion and how societies think, whereas racism has declined. We have abolished slavery in this part of the world and many others. and ideas about like, I don't know, racist beliefs, societal racist beliefs, have been trending downward as evolution's influence has only grown. And what does that coincide with? Religion's influence in the world going down. That's a funny correlation if this is caused by evolution, wouldn't you think?
Huxley is the grandfather of two men who were also famous in evolutionary circles today, Sir Julian Huxley and Aldous Huxley. Thomas Huxley had been witness to on several occasions. Here is one quote from the Encyclopedia of Illustrations, #6230, entitled Huxley's Sunday Talk by J.B. Dengis. The next individual on our journey through the history of evolution is Ernest Haeckel. He was born in 1834 and died in 1919. He was a German
I know that Kent really hates Haeckel. He says that when people talk about embryology as a way to study as a way to prove concepts in evolution, Kent always goes, "All right, I can't believe you're repeating the claims of Ernst Haeckel. It was debunked in the 1800s, blah, 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 blah. An oak tree can't become an amoeba, and an amoeba can't become a person. My name is Kent Hovind. Please give me money for my park where children get molested and killed." Yeah, so that's probably what he'll talk about here. I'll just preempt this with a few things. Ernst von Baer, I believe it was, came out with a book right away attacking Haeckel's idea that, oh yeah, I can see it right here, the recapitulation theory. I did a podcast episode about this. No, we don't literally go through a reptile stage, an amphibian stage, a fish stage, or whatever. But it's absolutely true that the embryos are between species are almost indistinguishable at many stages. In fact, every single one of them is completely indistinguishable at one stage, because at one stage we're just fertilized eggs. Kent would have to admit that a fertilized egg is a human. I actually don't disagree. I don't think it can be anything else, because if you make that doesn't mean it has legal personhood, but once you start saying it's not, then there are huge problems with that. But we don't need to have that conversation. If he's going to say that, then that means a fertilized egg is also a frog, if it's a frog egg and, whatever else. And, I guess frog eggs are pretty easy to tell, but you take any mammal and the fertilized egg is indistinguishable. Now, again, we're not literally transforming into different things, but they are very difficult to tease the differences between them out.
Biologist and philosopher. He developed the biogenetic law, or the recapitulation theory. This theory teaches that the human embryo inside the mother's womb goes through the different stages of evolution, from fish to reptile to mammal to human. This has long since been disproven. It is now known that there is no recapitulation. This theory is used for the justification for abortion. The human embryo, the abortionists say, is not fully human yet, and it is okay to kill it because it hasn't yet reached the human stage. I'm not saying that abortion started with evolution. I am saying that evolution does serve to give, in the abortionist's mind, some scientific justification to abortion.
Oh, for crying out loud. So I'm just going to have to say this so I don't have to pin a comment on my video. No, I'm not a pro-lifer. I am pro-choice.
Haeckel was an advocate of Lamarck's theory that acquired characteristics could be inherited. He invented all sorts of sketches or fabricated pictures that showed the different embryos of animals, including man, and how they were so similar. He later confessed that these were lies. These sketches were reproduced and are still displayed in some textbooks. Haeckel became one of Germany's ideologists for racism, nationalism, and imperialism. Probably more than any other man,
true.
Haeckel is responsible for the influence on a young man who was to come later and radically change the world, Adolf Hitler.
I don't know if that's
true. In reading Haeckel's
true.
ideas and experiments, Hitler decided that the strongest race was the one that was to survive. His
which is not evolution.
Imperialism led to his belief that the Germans were to take over the world. Much harm has come to the world by this man, Ernest Haeckel.
Oh, man.
In the mid-1850s, there was a revival of the Buddhist cult. It was co-founded by Colonel H.S. Olcott. The goal of this was to unify the Buddhist. The name of this revival was Theosophy. The Theosophy cult was also founded by Madame Helena Blavatsky. The second statement in their platform of doctrinal belief says, the universe was evolved, not created.
I have no clue what he's talking about, sorry.
And it functions according to law. We are seeing a great revival of the New Age cult today.
Oh, no.
Sigmund Freud is the next man in the great influence
Sigmund Freud.
and against biblical Christianity. He was born in 1856 and died in 1939. He was an ardent follower of Darwin. In 1915, he was convinced that Darwin's and Lamarck's theories were right. He believed that acquired traits could be inherited. He thought that mental disorders were simply leftover behaviors that had been appropriate in earlier stages of evolution. He also believed in the recapitulation theory. Freud is known as the father of modern psychology. Many of the teachings and practices of psychology today are based on Freud's observations that man is just an animal and needs to be treated as an animal.
So, again, we have to remember that he was writing this in 1991. And funny enough, just psychologists back then were evolutionary psychology was really like not a thing. It barely started to become a thing in the 90s. A lot of the work of Jonathan Haidt I've read, and his talks I've listened to. He talks openly about that. So you can't poison, in the time in which he wrote this, you can't poison psychology with evolution. Not that evolutionary psychology has been bad in any way. I think it's actually remarkably interesting, and it teaches us a lot of critical things about our behavior that help us to overcome our biases. I wouldn't exactly say that all that much of this paragraph is exactly wrong, but it's so inconsequential and it doesn't matter. Freud this correctly describes some of the things that Freud thought, but Freud was wrong about so much. Every historical figure that Kent reveres thought that the sun orbited the earth. Okay, so let's just throw out Christianity now because because the people he reveres had wrong ideas.
The next man we come to is Sir Julian Huxley. He was born in 1887 and died in 1975. He was the first Director General of UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. He was also one of the founders of the American Humanists Association in 1933. He was a pantheist and believed that nature is the God that is to be worshipped. He is quoted as saying, "Darwin's theory is no longer a theory, but a fact."
Yep.
He is also quoted as saying, "No supernatural designer is needed."
Correct.
He believed that evolution could answer all of the problems. He was a leader of the New Age movement until his death in 1975. It is reported by his nurse that on his deathbed, as he looked up to heaven with a blank stare, he said, "So it is true."
Wow.
His brother Aldous Huxley, born in 1894 and died 1963, was a leader in the modern drug culture. He was an atheist, a philosopher, and a strong advocate of hallucinogenic drugs.
Oh, what does this have to do
Huxley
with
is
evolution?
largely responsible for the drug culture that developed in the 60s. He was one of the first intellectuals to openly promote taking drugs as a way to expand your mind and your experience. And there are a number of people on the list in the 20th century who have had an influence for evolution and against God. Henry Fairfield Osborn, an American anthropologist, was a leading evolutionist and an avid racist.
Yeah.
During the first half of this century, he was the director of the American Museum of Natural History. He believed that the various stages of childhood for a Caucasian were said to represent the lower races and how high they had attained in evolution. For instance,
wow.
he said that the blacks are at the bottom, then the yellow races, then the whites are at the top. Let me quote from Osborn's book, The Evolution of Human Races, Natural History Magazine, Jan-Feb, 1926, p. 129.
Oh, you know what? I actually looked this up, and I have the book here. I didn't read all that much of it, but this is predicated on some stuff that's like definitely wrong. So they sort of show it's hard to really understand exactly what he's talking about here, but you can see where there are these branches, and he places the Australian. I don't know what that Hottentot. That might be Native American. That sounds like a Native American tribe. The Chinese man and the Caucasian on top. I'm not really sure when these branches are supposed supposed to have taken place. I mean, obviously there were splits, sort of like the earliest ones about somewhere between like 45,000 and 60,000 years ago. But no, there's no putting any of them on top or anything like that. So yeah, he actually writes intelligence. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see it right there, but funny enough though, Osborne was a proponent of teaching religion in schools. What? And this is from the exact same book. I'm not really going to read very much of it, but his points are: a simplified religion and a reverent science, religion or science alone fails, the scientific experiment in Russia. That actually would be interesting to see what he was talking about there. Teaching of the universal elements of religion, the respective gifts of the Hebrews and of the Christians, the historic elements of religion, governors of morals in the daily press. I don't know what that means. But yeah, he's in favor of religion being taught in schools, with a particular emphasis in Western religions.
The Negroid stock is even more ancient than the Caucasian and Mongolian, as may be proved by an examination not only of the brain, of the hair, of the bodily characters, such as the teeth, the genitalia, the sense organs, but of the instincts, the intelligence. The standard of intelligence of the average adult Negro is similar to that of the 11-year-old youth of the species Homo sapiens.
Yikes.
Evolution has brought the world so much trouble. This is one of the key tools that Satan is using here in the end times to bring the world under his dominion.
Oh, the end times. I wonder when Kent thinks the world is going to end. That would be really funny if he had some predictions. There have been so many of them. I'll have to decide later, but I actually have a 10-minute long video on my phone of Christians predicting the end of the world and it not coming true. It's so funny every time that happens. But yeah, I've seen a lot of polling that says something like a third of Americans think the world will end in their lifetime. And it comes from, it's not from climate alarmists or anything like that. It's from the hyper religious types. So the end times.
Shintoism is the state religion of Japan. It is a mixture of Buddhism and ancient polytheistic myths about Japanese people. Shintoism teaches that the Japanese are descendants of the gods and are destined to rule the world. They teach that the emperor is from the sun god, the highest god. It was Shintoism, based on evolution, that was responsible for Japan's actions in World War II.
Shintoism is not based on evolution. What kind of idiotic statement is that?
They were determined to take over and rule the world, just like Hitler was doing in Germany. Both of them were motivated by a desire to help evolution along.
No.
This goes right back to the Garden of Eden, where Satan said, "Ye shall be as gods." From the very beginning, man has had a desire to take over the throne of God, and Satan promotes that desire by the teaching of evolution. It has long been my contention that evolution is just another religion. There is no empirical evidence to back it up, so it is certainly not. It has long been my contention that evolution is just another religion.
So he's been saying this forever, because again, this paper is 33 years old. This paper is only a little bit younger than me. This was on like May 25th or something. My birthday's at the beginning of May. So, so he's been saying evolution's a religion for a very long time. That's interesting. So incredibly stupid. It can't be a religion. It just absolutely cannot be a religion. There's no appeal to anything supernatural. And that's really all you need to say about it.
There is no empirical evidence to back it up, so it is certainly not a part of science. The evolutionists
There's nothing but empirical evidence.
say that man made God instead of God making man.
Yep.
Who is right? In this chapter, I would like to discuss the evolution of religion, or the religion of evolution, which is it. The public schools have been teaching for the last 50 years that religion...
Those are... He said that as if it was like some clever, like, oh, are you working hard or hardly working? But no, these are completely the evolution of religion. I think, Kent, in your mind, you already covered that, because last time we had to listen to you drone on forever about all the Eastern religions or whatever. but you can't, the evolution of religion and the religion of evolution, those are not, it's so completely, they're just non-overlapping.
Religion has evolved. We have been taught that man started off believing in many gods, worshipping the rocks, stars, etc., the caveman philosophy, and that he gradually developed monotheism, the belief in one God. Yet archaeology seems to tell us that just the opposite is true.
No.
It tells us that man has always been a monotheist and worshipped one God.
Absolutely not.
All of the ancient cultures seem to teach us just the opposite of what we are being taught in our public schools today. Religion has not evolved.
Yes,
man did not create God.
The book you worship has a New Testament.
God created man. Since evolution is just a religion, it should not be taught in public schools at taxpayers' expense unless all religions are going to be taught.
Irony
of
ironies.
In 1963, the Supreme Court ruled that if a parent or child objects to certain materials being taught in the public schools, the child cannot be removed from the class because that would violate his constitutional rights. The court further decided that the objectionable course or material would have to be removed. This case involved the question of prayer and religion. The precedent can be applied to sex education or any other questionable material. The ruling also said that
sex education is quite... I mean, like, it's obviously possible that you can, like, screw up sex education and do and say things you shouldn't do or say, but, like, you know that, like, teen pregnancies are at historical all-time lows in this country? Obviously, sex education works.
Government building or facility may be used to commit inhibitions or hostilities to godly religion. There may some reading this who may remember when prayer was taken out of the public school system. I was only in the 5th grade and did not understand what was going on. Madeline Murray O'Hare did not want her son made to pray in the public school. She said that it was objectionable to her. She claimed that that was an obvious case of the government advancing a religion at the taxpayer's expense.
Yes, exactly.
She was very successful in getting prayer taken out of the public school system.
Yes, in accordance with the First Amendment.
Of course, I don't like what Madeline Murray O'Hare stands for or what she did, but it does bring up an interesting point. If evolution is just a religion, then it also should be taken out of the public schools.
Well, it's not.
I would like to see some legal action taken to get evolution taken out of the public school system on the grounds that it is just a religion.
Is he going to actually argue that evolution is a religion?
The first step is to approach the school board and request that they remove the objectionable materials.
Oh, no.
Step 2 is to go to the people who supply the funds for the school, the county commission. Step 3 is to take the issue to court. There are basically 4 options in this issue. The first option is to teach evolution only and ignore creation or any other theories of the origin of the earth.
That's exactly what you should do in a science class. Yeah.
This is what is going on now in the public school system.
Yeah.
The option at the other end of the scale would be to teach only creation. This is what was going on in 1925.
That why on earth would anybody do that?
In Dayton, Tennessee. Tennessee had passed a law that made the teaching of evolution a crime. A young biology teacher in the small town of Dayton was encouraged to create a test case by teaching evolution in spite of the law. The teacher was arrested and tried. The now famous atheist lawyer Clarence Darrow came in as defense for the side of the teacher and evolution. Darrow said that it was unfair to teach only one side of the issue. He said that it was the height of bigotry to prevent students from learning both sides of this issue. Even though Darrow lost the case and the teacher was fined $100, his plea for equal treatment was headed. Slowly, the schools began to teach the theory of evolution with the truth of creation. We are now at the other end of the spectrum. The tides have totally shifted.
The theory of evolution and the truth of creation. Brilliant marketing strategy, but just such a piece of shit.
And we are now teaching only evolution. This is Scopes in reverse. Good. The same bigotry that they objected against, they now condone since the tails are turned.
Nope, science isn't bigotry.
Most public school teachers don't mention creation. They have been told that it is against the law to talk about creation because it is a religious subject.
I have no idea. So, especially in the 90s, but like today, I cannot tell you how many people have told me the exact opposite of this. It comes up all the time. People say they didn't even teach evolution when I was in high school. The teacher would openly say, I don't really believe in this, but I have to tell you about it. or just like saying, I am not going to teach you about evolution because I don't want to, I don't believe it. It's so no, Kent, just no.
Evolution is religious also. There are two middle ground options available in this issue.
Well, here, let me say one thing though. I would not bet money that more than half the schools don't teach evolution. I wouldn't say that, but what I am saying is for any case of a teacher like me who would say in their classroom, I don't believe in religion, so we're not going to talk about religion, we're just going to do evolution. For every one teacher, I don't know why any would say that. I've never done that. But for any one of them you can find, you'll find 1,000 teachers that are going to say, I am religious. I don't believe in evolution. We were created by God. We're not going to learn evolution. So that's what I mean by it's way more of a problem on the other side.
The first would be to teach both evolution and creation in the public school classrooms. This was passed as law in the state of Louisiana, but was never enforced because people contested that law. This was contested because the idea of the First Amendment has religion's connotations, and therefore they contested it should not be taught in the public school system.
Exactly.
They immediately claimed the separation of church and state. This ideal is not found in the Constitution.
Yes,
it is found in Jefferson's writings.
Right. The quote, separation of church and state, is in Jefferson's letter, but Madison explicitly told Congress what the First Amendment means is that there should never be a law that compels anybody to follow any religion or anything like that, and public schools act as a branch or an arm of the government in a sense.
Even if this true, the courts decided that teachers have the right to give any number of theories on the origin of the earth. The next option is to leave both of these beliefs out of the public school system. I taught high school science and mathematics. I know that you can teach students many things without mentioning origins and where we came from. It is possible to leave the issue totally up to the home or to the church. The public school system is right now using option number 1, teaching dogmatically evolution. They would never dream of switching to option 4 of teaching only creation. Since option 2 of teaching both has not worked, I believe we are left with option 3. I believe we should just leave both beliefs out of the public school system.
You know, it could be a lot worse. He could be going for the teach creation in the schools, I guess. But this is it's just still so stupid.
Madeleine Murray O'Hair had a very valid point. It is not right to use tax dollars to promote religion, any religion.
Well, you wouldn't know anything about that, Kent.
Webster defines a religion as a belief in a divine or superhuman power or powers to be obeyed and worshipped as the creator of the universe. What created the universe? Is it blind chance, evolution? If so, then blind chance is their creator. And
sorry, I kind of spaced out. A belief in a divine or superhuman power or powers to be obeyed and worshipped as the creator of the universe. Okay, so the only thing you could possibly argue is that evolution is a superhuman, because the only thing in here that could possibly work, because it can't possibly be this. There's no appeal to the divine or the supernatural. Superhuman power, I take that to mean a force that is like literally indescribable because it's magic or supernatural. The only possible case you could make is that, the way natural selection operates, or like there may be fundamentally parts of it that are just so complex that we'll never be able to grasp, and then you just label that as superhuman. That's the only possible thing. Or, now keep in mind, these would be separate ideas. Powers to be obeyed and worshipped, no, as the creator of the universe. So yeah, he may strawman, he'll say the Big Bang is one of the types of evolution, and he'll say that that's what created the universe. Nobody should say the Big Bang created the universe. That's just not the case. So I don't know. I guess we'll see.
And they worship chance. time and matter become the gods of the evolutionist. If you begin taking away time from the evolutionist by saying that the Earth is young, that is like taking a pacifier out of a baby's mouth.
Well, luckily we know the Earth can't possibly be young.
If Webster's definition of religion is correct, then evolution is definitely a part of religion, not science. I taught science for many years, and I am not against real science. However, we have entered the realm of religion when we begin saying that the Earth came into being out of nothing.
Yep, there we go. There's the straw man. Nobody has ever... Nobody claims that.
There is a wealth of information on this subject.
Kent.
Let me share what a few evolutionists have said about evolution. Sir Arthur Keith, an avid evolutionist, said, "Evolution is unproved and unprovable. We believe it because the only alternative is special creation, and that is unthinkable." This reveals quite a bit about the...
I mean, in a purely like philosophical sense, tons of people say that science never proves anything. I usually never say that because I'm just trying to operate on layman's terms and understandings. I consider myself kind of to be a layman. Actually, I know a lot about some things, but very little about other things. So if I had to guess, that's what that person meant.
The evolutionists. They believe it only because they do not like the option of special creation. L.H. Matthews, the evolutionist who wrote the preface to the 1971 edition of Darwin's book, said, "Belief in the theory of evolution was exactly parallel to the belief in special creation, with evolution merely a satisfactory faith on which to base our interpretation of nature. Evolution is a faith, a religion." Pierre Grasse, the French biologist, said, "Scientists should destroy the myth of evolution." L.H. Lipscomb, the British physicist, said, "In fact, evolution in a sense became a scientific religion. Almost all scientists have accepted it, and many are prepared to bend their observations to fit in with it."
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who these people are. I don't know exactly what their problem is. Perhaps their problem is that people just aren't thinking critically enough about evolution by natural selection to come up with new ideas to challenge the existing framework and build a better theory in the future. That's all I can think of.
Evolution, without a question, is a religion. It is a religion of humanism. Either man is the ultimate king of the world, or God is the ultimate king of the world. Humanism is the religion of man being the ultimate. Humanist Manifesto. One says, humanism is a philosophical, religious, and moral point of view as old as human civilization itself. They admit right up front that it is religious. They go on to say, in 1933, a group of 34 liberal humanists enunciated the philosophical and religious principles that seemed to them fundamental. They drafted Humanist Manifesto 1, which for its time was a radical document. This document was concerned with expressing a general religious and philosophical outlook that rejected orthodox and dogmatic positions and provided meaning and direction, unity and purpose to human life. It was committed to reason, science, and democracy.
Oh, no.
It goes on to say that if no deity will save us, we must save ourselves. Humanism, without a question, is religious. Humanists admit to this fact. Here are a few different statements from Humanist Manifesto 1 and 2 that further illustrate the religious nature of evolutionism. The numbers correspond to the actual statement number from Humanist Manifesto 1 and 2 by Prometheus Books, edited by Paul Kurtz. The first statement is, religious humanists regard the universe as self-existing, not created. They are calling...
Okay, well, that's not religious, because in your definition of religion, it appealed to forces that create the universe.
Calling themselves religious humanists. Humanism is a religion. Here in...
No, they're saying people who happen to be religious and are humanists. Oh, man.
In the foundational document of humanism, we see that they regard the universe as self-existing and not created. In other words, they believe in evolution. Matter has always been here, and the earth created itself.
That's not evolution.
The second statement is, humanism believes that man is a part of nature and that he has emerged as a result of a continuous process.
Yeah, it's not
Again,
religion.
referring plainly to evolution. It could be easily proven that the foundation of humanism is evolution, and humanism is a religion. Therefore, the teaching of evolution in the
Well, you haven't done it.
tax-supported public school system is the fostering and furthering of a religion. The only religion being promoted at the taxpayer's expense is the religion of...
So, if that were the case, although this humanism stuff, like you can put a date on it when it started being labeled that, but like, This would make teaching American government illegal in schools too, because we're a secular government and all of the powers belong to the people in order to establish and create a better society. So if humanism is religion and must be banned from schools, then government must also.
Humanism. We need to put a stop to that. The third statement in the Humanist Manifesto says, holding an organic view of life, humanists find that traditional dualism of mind and body must be rejected. With the phrase an organic view of life, they are saying that evolution is the way we got here. The fourth statement says, we are products of a gradual development. Gradual development, again, refers to evolution. The eighth statement in the Humanist Manifesto says, religious humanism considers the complete realization of human personality to be the end of man's life and seeks its development and fulfillment in the here and now. Again, they refer
that's hedonism.
to their philosophy as religious humanism. The ninth statement says, in place of the old attitudes involved in worship and prayer, the humanist finds his emotions expressed in a heightened sense of personal life in a cooperative effort to promote social well-being. The 12th statement says, religious humanists aim to foster the creative in man and encourage achievements that add to the satisfactions of life. The 13th statement begins, religious humanism maintains that all associations and institutions exist for the fulfillment of human life. The last paragraph of Humanists Manifesto 1 says, so stand the theses of religious humanism. That is the gist of the Humanist Manifesto.
So if that's the way they worded it, then maybe he has a point. I mean, either way, I don't care. You can call humanism a religion, and part of what they believe is evolution, but I don't know. If the humanists are calling themselves a religion, then I think they're confused. But maybe that's not what they mean either. So I don't know. If somebody knows,
we
talk
go
about
on
it.
now, the Humanist Manifesto 2, written by Paul Kurtz and Edward Wilson. It says, salvationism still appears as harmful. Read this carefully. The idea here is to teach people that Christians are the enemy and that we are standing in the way of progress.
You are.
I believe we as Christians...
You always have been. In the Western world, the group of people that's always been against every single type of progress, they have identified as Christians. That doesn't mean that every single Christian has always opposed everything in the name of progress, but they have always been, the naysayers always have identified that way.
Need to be aware of this message. Most of the programs on television are examples of Hollywood's definite desire to discredit Christianity. You will not see a preacher portrayed as a God-fearing man. You will see him portrayed as a wild-eyed fanatic killing people, or stealing money from the church or some other evil deed.
Man, they're saying that same shit back in the
Hollywood
90s.
Movies about Christianity. There is a deliberate war being waged against religion in general and Christianity in particular. Other religions, such as Hinduism and Buddhism, are taught as being okay, even in the public schools. But the idea of bringing in Christianity is utterly despised. The Humanist Manifesto 2 goes on to say, any account of nature should pass the test of scientific evidence. In our judgment, the dogmas and myths of traditional religion do not do so. If they really mean that the account of nature should pass the test of
That's very well said on the Humanist Manifesto part. I really like that.
Scientific evidence, they should examine and see if evolution will pass the test of scientific evidence.
It does
In order
and
for
has.
something to be scientific, it has to be observable.
It is.
Anything outside the realm of observation is not scientific.
Yes, it is.
For something to be scientific, it must be testable.
All kinds of things are indirectly observable in science.
There is no observation to back up evolution, and no test has devised to demonstrate it.
For example, literally all forms of electromagnetic radiation except for visible light are completely unobservable. You can build instruments that capture the radiation and produce digital images that we then see as visible light, but you cannot observe X-rays. It is like literally not possible for a human to observe an X-ray ever. It's not possible.
If evolution occurred in the past, it should have been preserved for us in the fossil record. We have trillions of fossils, yet we have absolutely no evidence of evolution occurring in the past. there is nothing going on in the present that gives evidence of evolution. Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge, two famous evolutionists, said, "At the higher level of evolutionary transition between basic morphological designs, gradualism has always been in trouble, though it remains the official position of most Western evolutionists. Smooth intermediates between basic kinds are almost impossible to construct. Even in thought experiments, there is certainly no evidences for them in the fossil record. Curious mosaics like Archaeopteryx do not count." In his review of Stephen Stanley's book Macroevolution, D.S. Woodruff said, "Fossil species remain unchanged throughout most of their history, and the record fails to record a single example of a transition. There is no evidence in the fossil record for evolution." In a Newsweek article entitled, "Is Man a Subtle Accident?" November 3, 1980, it is said, "The missing link between man and ape, whose absence has comforted fundamentalists since the days of Darwin, is merely the most glamorous of a whole hierarchy of phantom creatures. The more scientists have searched for the transitional forms that lie between species, the more they have been frustrated. There have been no missing links. The entire chain is missing."
So he ends the quote there. It would be interesting to see what the rest of it says. I'm not going to go digging for a Newsweek article from from 1980. I'm not doing that. But no, I mean, all we have as we have gone through the fossil record are missing links. I mean, I can just show you a picture from my book here real quick of some brontotheres that a lot of these they dig up in South Dakota, actually, in the Badlands. Where the heck is it? Yeah, right here. I really love this image of all the skulls there representing clear transitions. Now, Kent would say something like, "Yeah, but it's still the same kind of animal." And it's like, yeah, but they're vastly different. The skulls are. So clearly they evolved. What's really funny, something I did in my book that I think this is just funny. I take the claim there are no missing links, and I just listed all of those and all of those. I just gave like a page and a half full of just nothing but missing links, and then I go on to say a few other things.
Evolution is a religion. It does not fit the criteria of science. It is not observable. There is no observation for evolution in the past or in the present. Stephen Jay Gould.
You can never directly observe the past. All you can do is collect evidence for things that have happened. So that doesn't make it not science. That would by definition make every single, like, I could make I think this is a dumb argument, but I think it actually would be true given his line of reasoning. And I've said something like this before. Literally every single observation we make occurs in the past, because whatever object you're studying, the light has to hit your eyes, or the photons have to reach your retina, and the image has to be processed by your brain. So you can literally only ever experience the past. And so I'll just create a religion that says there's a magic fairy goddess thing, and it sprinkles, or maybe you guys saw my unicorn video from not that long ago. Queef dust from a magical uniform blankets the whole earth, and as the photons pass through the queef dust, it alters the images, making what we see not what reality is in front of us. And to claim anything else is the case, that just means you're inventing your own religion that says something else. Do you see how dumb that sounds? But that is the level we are at here.
It says in Natural History, "The return of hopeful monsters." The fossil record, with its abrupt transitions, offers no support for gradual change. All paleontologists know that the fossil record contains precious little in the way of intermediate forms. Transitions between major groups are characteristically abrupt.
And I guarantee that this person is not claiming, therefore, evolution is not true. They're just saying that we have very, very, very little, we don't have every single missing link or whatever. We have precious few. But it literally only takes one, and like Archaeopteryx is literally all you need. I mean, it is to prove the idea of evolution as a concept, but it's been backed up by genetics, as we know. So, yeah, I mean, I could say other things, but whatever.
If the definition of science is observation, classification of data, and experimentation, where is the observation for evolution? Evolution is a religious faith. If the evolutionists want to believe in evolution, they are free to do so. We live in America, which is a free country. We are free to choose what we want to believe. What I am upset about is the fact that their faith is being taught as science in the public school system at my expense as a taxpayer.
You don't pay
That
taxes.
upsets me greatly. Romans 1:21 says, because that, when they knew God, they glorified him not as God.
I don't care. I'm
neither
not listening
they
to the
became
Bible.
Fools, and to bird and forefoot their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God up unto vile affections. For even their women did change the natural use into that which is again nature. And evolution is a deliberate attempt to eliminate God. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, this last statement says it all. Evolution is a deliberate attempt to eliminate God. It is time for thinking people to dethrone evolution and get some common sense back in the science class. I write letters to the editor very frequently. Here is one published some time ago that...
Letters to the editor? That's the most boomer thing I can imagine. How old was Kent when he wrote this? So he was not quite 40 years old at the time. I guess newspapers were a bigger deal back then, but yeah, writing letters to the editor, that sounds like the most grumpy old man type of thing. Funny enough, I actually wrote a letter to the editor when I lived in South Dakota because some guy wrote their own, and he said climate change isn't real because one time in the 1930s, I tried to go for a walk around a lake with my friends and it was too hot and we didn't make it. Like as if implying it was hot in the 30s too, therefore climate change isn't happening, which is just so incredibly stupid.
sums up my feelings on the subject. Evolution isn't science. Remember the story of tailors who kept asking for more silk and gold to make a royal suit for the king? The deceitful men were pocketing the goods and giving the king imaginary clothes. Anyone who couldn't see the splendor of these clothes was obviously not intelligent. To even dare to suggest that His Highness was not gorgeously arrayed was to invite a barrage.
No way this is happening right now. There's a police chase happening right outside my window. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go film it. I'll put it in the video for you guys. Be right back. Okay, I wasn't able to get any footage for you.
To even dare to suggest that His Highness was not gorgeously arrayed was to invite a barrage of ridicule and scorn. And so the entire kingdom was duped into silence until a small, ignorant boy cried out, "The kind hath no clothes." It is...
I've never heard the origin of the emperor has no clothes story before. That's interesting. I didn't know that's how it went.
still true today that a few scoundrels can cajole the masses into silence about the obvious using ridicule and derision. For example, it is obvious that evolution didn't, doesn't, and won't happen. Design demands a designer. Frogs don't turn into princes, and bib bangs make big messes, not neat, orderly universes. There are no facts to support evolutionism. It stands royally naked. Over 90% of the ignorant masses believe that the world was created by God. Thousands of taxpayers in this county resent their tax money supporting the humanist...
Yes, before science, we came up with ideas about where everything came from, and groups of people that never heard the stories of your religion came up with their own religion, and you think that they're stupid. You think those stories are stupid. But that just proves that absent any good reason, people will invent mythological stories for things. That's just hilarious that he said that.
Religion of evolution in our schools. In spite of this, Katie Knight, science curriculum supervisor in Escambia County, told me that only one person is objecting to the teaching of evolution in our schools. Me. How long will we let them steal our gold and give us nothing in return? They steal our kids' class time and brain power promoting this fairy tale of evolution while they keep asking for more gold. Review the books this year and voice your complaint. Textbooks are being selected now. Let's get back to teaching real science and stop letting them tell us that evolutionism must be included. It is not science and is not even remotely related to science. Even though the socialist tailors insist I'm the one who is blind and give evolutionism royal treatment, I still say, the king, evolution, hath no clothes.
Can somebody decode what the fuck is going on in Kent Hovind's brain where he keeps those goddamn evolutionists and their socialism? By the way, evolution is the reason we have capitalism, and capitalism is wrong and evil. What does Kent believe we should do? Like, read the Bible, own one piece of clothing, a garment that you simply, a cloth that you just wrap around your waist, and pick berries and shit in the woods? He seems so confused about that. I mean, how should that surprise anybody that he is confused? On to the effects of evolution.
Evolution is probably one of the most important subjects facing us today because of the worldview and lifestyle that it breeds. A person's belief that he is a creator.
Yeah, it promotes rationalism. It helps with it helps tremendously with the field of medicine. And any society that just deliberately decides to suspend the truth, I mean, that's a society that's on its way to collapse, I would say.
Of God involves a particular worldview that will make him live a certain way. If he believes that he is a creation of chance, that there is no God, then that will produce a lifestyle or worldview that will have certain consequences on his life. Who cares anyway? Why is this subject so important? I'd like to begin by saying that the subject is very dear to my heart. I'm both glad and sad to be able to discuss the topic of creation, evolution in the Bible. I'm glad because I love the Bible and the God of the Bible, and I'm honored to be able to share my faith in God's incredible book. I'm glad because we have freedom in this country that allows us to discuss topics like this. Many other countries do not even allow a discussion on this subject. You have to accept the state opinion. America is headed that way, I fear. But I'm glad that right now in America, we have the freedom to discuss the contradictory or conflicting.
I wouldn't be surprised if Kent supports the idea of having blasphemy laws and things like that. So to make that statement is just so ironic.
Religions of creation and evolution. I'm glad because discussions of this type will force people to take a stand on the issue. You either believe one side or the other. There is no middle ground in this case. But I am very sad because many other countries don't allow this type of discussion on creation and evolution. Many millions of my brothers in the faith have given their lives and fortunes for the blessed book, the Bible. I'm sad because it looks like many more will have to do the same in the next few years, the way things are going. I'm also sad because those who reject the words of this blessed book are missing the greatest joy known to man, fellowship with God. They are also missing the real reason and purpose of life. If the words of the time-tested book are true, those who reject them and the forgiveness they offer are doomed to face God and give an account of their sin before their Creator. God will be their judge on that day,
effects of evolution.
whereas He will be my Father on that day. This topic is personal for me. It's not just academic. If someone says that the Bible is
academic, nothing you've ever done in your life could even accidentally be called academic. Well, actually, it could only accidentally be called academic.
Is a myth and is not true, or that the doctrine of evolution is true and the Genesis account of creation is false, they are attacking the very foundation of my faith.
So?
Jesus said that the creation of Adam and Eve was the beginning. Matt 9.
Yeah, and he was wrong too.
19:4. It would be like saying that my father is a liar. Calling Genesis a myth or creation a myth is like saying slanderous things about my mom or dad or wife or family.
I mean, if they're anything like you, then that's exactly what should be done. Although, from what I understand, his own family has basically disowned him, except for Eric.
It will be hard for me not to get emotionally involved in this topic. We need to remember Aristotle's dictum. Aristotle said, "If a document is being questioned, the benefit of the doubt is given to the document itself, not arrogated by the critic to himself. One must listen to the claims of the document under analysis and not assume fraud or error unless the author disqualifies himself by contradictions or known factual inerrancies."
Yeah, and the Bible is replete with all kinds of inaccuracies and contradictions. I went back to look at the original document. He did write Aristoteles, so that's pretty funny.
There are basically two choices in this argument. Choice number one is that the material universe that we see made itself out of nothing for no reason. Then, through a long process of evolution, the different animals and man developed as we see them today. Choice number 2 is that there is an infinite, all-powerful, all-wise God who created this universe that we see for some special reasons. There are those who try to make a middle ground position called theistic evolution. This says that God created the matter and helped evolution along at critical points, like the...
So, I should have paused earlier, but the idea that option 1 is my completely brain-dead straw man of the position, so on and so forth. No. First of all, your description is wrong, but even if you're... like the beginning part, like, we can just throw that out. But like the deistic perspective can still be true. A God can exist. It's not either the God I believe in exists or nothing, or either. So it's just, I don't know. It's
the origin of life and things like that. That is an indefensible position. The choices are either the universe made itself or God made it. Both are in the realm of religion. People that believe in evolution want to make you think that what they believe is a scientific fact.
Or the universe is uncreated.
Nothing could be farther from the truth. These people are either extremely optimistic or just bold-faced liars. Evolution is not a scientific fact. It actually is not even a good theory. It is just a hypothesis.
Nope.
Actually, evolution fits into the realm of religion. Webster's definition of religion says, belief in a divine or super...
No way did he actually say the exact same thing. Oh. Completely repeating an... Oh, wow.
Human power to be obeyed and worshipped as the creator and ruler of the universe. If this process of evolution created and rules the universe, then that is the superhuman power that the evolutionists worship. Many people down through the years have admitted that evolution is just a religion. Some still won't today because they don't understand the subject. For instance, Sir Arthur...
Irony of ironies.
Arthur Keith, the British biologist, said, evolution is unproved and unprovable. We believe it because the only alternative is special creation.
Wait, yeah, no, this is exactly... Yeah, this is a complete repeat of what we had earlier. Wow. Huh. How long does this... okay, it doesn't go on for all that long.
That is unthinkable. L.H. Matthews,
Wow.
the man who wrote the preface to the 1971 edition of Charras, a French biologist, said, scientists should destroy the myth of evolution.
I'm skipping
many are
this.
prepared. Microevolution is small little changes where there is no change from one kind of organism to another. Actually, evolution would be a bad term to use. Microevolution is only variations within the kind. It proves foresight of the Creator in providing His creatures with the ability to adapt within limits to their environment. I don't question that variation exists.
So, wow. So why did God create animal? That idea is immediately disproven by the fact that Kent would acknowledge that the vast majority of all life on this planet has gone completely extinct.
I just interpret the evidence as part of God's design. I'll give you just one example to help you understand the difference. Let's suppose we let loose 500 canaries on an island. The only food for the canaries to eat on that island are nuts with a relatively tough shell around them. Only the canaries that had a tough beak would be able to eat the nuts and survive. The others would starve to death. Therefore, those that had the tougher beaks would be able to reproduce the next generation. If we came back to that island in about 200 years, we would find that all of the canaries on the island have tough beaks. That is not evolution. That is simply variation. You would still have canaries. The trait of having a tough beak was in the genetic structure to begin with. Nothing new has been added. We have only selected a certain portion of the population to survive. That is...
So yeah, like he's implying that in order for this to work, you'd have to imagine that when God created, because at one point God created the very first male and female canary, right? So did the very first male and female canary possess every single type of beak that can exist? No. So what he's saying just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Did one of them have the maximum largest beak and the other one had the minimum or the smallest possible functional beak? And so any offspring they would have would fall somewhere in there. That would be the only possible way to rescue that, but that's so stupid. There's obviously, you're not going to be able to collect evidence to support that idea. all of this, the way he's framed this, is just a post hoc rationalization.
Is variation, not evolution. Those canaries will never, given all the time you want, will never change into elephants or dinosaurs or trees or tomatoes.
True, but dinosaurs did turn into birds.
If they did, that would be macroevolution. Microevolution is small little variations between the species that have been in the genetic structure by. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the terms that are used today about evolution.
Yeah, this is why I really hate it when people show you like baby pictures and say that that's them. When has a baby ever turned into a fully grown adult human? Never.
Let me quote just a few more things here. In Scientific America, May 1984, Alan Good said, "The inflationary model of the universe provides a possible mechanism by which the observable universe could have evolved from an infinitesimal region. It is then tempting to go one step further and speculate that the entire universe evolved from literally nothing. You can speculate and say that it's possible all you want,
Stupid.
but that is a religion. That's your faith. Don't tell Ma that is science. You cannot prove that. If you want to believe that, that is fine. This is America. You can believe whatever you want to believe, but don't tell me that is science, and don't use my tax dollars to teach other kids in the public schools that that is science. That's nonsense. If you think that it is really important to teach evolution to the young people, then go start yourself a private school.
This whole thing still sounds like a letter to the editor. It's just the incoherent, butthurt ramblings of some idiot boomer.
Charge tuition and teach evolution to those who want to pay to come and learn it. But it is deceitful, wrong, and wicked to use the public's tax money to promote this religion of evolution in our public schools. We've got to put a stop to it. Let me quote just a few more here. David Kitts in Paleontology and Evolutionary Thought magazine said, "Evolution, at least in the sense that Darwin speaks of it, cannot be detected within the lifetime of a single observer. It cannot be detected. It is not part of science. It is just a religion." Here is a quote from Meyer's book, Systematic and Origin of Species. Darwin never really did discuss the origin of species in his On the Origin of Species. Colin Patterson, the curator at the British Museum of Natural History, said, "No one has ever produced a species by mechanisms of natural selection. No one has gotten near it."
That doesn't mean that it doesn't occur. Nobody's ever... You don't have to be able to recreate a certain stage of a process or anything like that to be able to collect and analyze evidence that supports that a process has taken place or is taking place.
The mechanisms for evolution that they try to tell us work so well are mutations and natural selection. No one has ever produced a new species by those means. Evolution is a religion. If evolutionists want to believe it, that is fine. But that is just their faith. I want to believe that God created it, and that is my faith, and I readily admit it. Many say, we can't mix religion in the public schools. In the first place, that is a faulty argument. The public schools desperately need some religion. They were started by religious institutions. There is nothing wrong with putting our religion in the public schools. The second argument that many people say is, well, you can't mix church and state. That is not found anywhere in the Constitution. That is in Jefferson's writings.
We already went over this.
Separation of church and state. The Constitution says that the government can make no law respecting an establishment of a religion or hindering the free exercise thereof. Teaching our young people that we evolved from monkeys in hindering the religion of Christianity. It's causing them to doubt their faith, and it needs to be eliminated.
So, I mean, that's an interesting case. Even if you didn't say that or believe that evolution was religion, you could claim, well, and this is where you can, like, I don't know, have some sort of like parental exemption or something. If you claim it's against your religion. That case you brought up earlier, they ruled it was unconstitutional because if you just selectively opt out, then you're denying your child education. I don't know the specifics of that. That's interesting. That is a weird tap dance that you have to figure out. Whatever.
First Amendment goes against the teaching of evolution. It is a hindrance to religious activity.
Got 13
evolution
more minutes.
Is just a religion. We must establish early in the discussion that the creation as evolution question cannot be scientifically resolved because both are religious faiths. They are dogmas. They are what you believe. People come into this argument having already decided what they want to believe based on their lifestyle. If a person has a wicked lifestyle and wants to get rid of God somehow, then it is only natural that he would choose the evolutionary idea to try to leave God out. By way of giving just a little more fact that evolution is just a religion and not scientific, Stephen Jay Gould, a noted evolutionist, said the fossil record with its abrupt transitions offers no support for gradual change. All paleontologists know that the fossil record contains precious little in the way of intermediate forms. Transitions between major groups are characteristically abrupt.
Yes. No way. Well, okay, well, I'll get to that in a second. So, again, that doesn't mean that Stephen Jay Gould thought that evolution was true, and Stephen Jay Gould did not go around saying that there's no evidence for evolution, but we're just going to lie and say that there is, or anything like that. So, for example, if somebody committed a murder and there was no evidence, but they confessed to it, then what could happen is you could take a quote, like if you were somebody that said that this person didn't do it, you could indeed find like in the legal documents or something, a quote that says, the fact is there is zero physical evidence that my client committed the murder or whatever. But you have the confession still, right? But did he... So he quoted Stephen Jay Gould, and then he wrote KVG, or KJV, get book title. I don't know what KV... Why is this so hard to say? I don't know what KJV... I'm just thinking King James Version of the Bible, because that's always what it says. But he left himself a note to get the title of the book, but he didn't get it. Oh, Kent, you fucking moron.
KJV, get book title. Evolution is their faith. They believe it because that is what they want to believe. In Newsweek magazine, Is Man a Subtle Accident? November 3.
He did it again. What is going on? What is the actual... Yeah, so that's exactly what he says here. But what is he... Oh my... That's just so pathetic.
1980. The missing link between man and ape, whose absence has comforted fundamentalists since the days of Darwin, is merely the most glamorous of a whole hierarchy of phantom creatures.
Somebody should... Kent has done more modern day debates than anybody, I feel like. Somebody should demand that he go on there and debate, does he have a PhD, a real PhD? I bet Kent would do that. I bet he would accept that. And then we need, like, I don't know, an auditor or something like that to go in there and compile all this stuff and have him defend it. Oh, that would be not defend whether or not what he's saying is true, not necessarily, but just because of the structure of it, to just prove that this thesis should have been thrown out. That would be so funny.
The more scientists have searched for the transitional forms that lie between species, the more they have been frustrated. There are no transitional forms between species because that is not the way we got here. Gould and Eldridge in Paleobiography, KJV, get title, said, at the higher level of evolutionary transition between basic morphological design, gradualism has always been in trouble. Though it remains the official position of most Western evolutionists, smooth intermissions between different animals are almost impossible to construct. Even in thought experiments, there is certainly no evidence for them in the fossil record. Curious mosaics like Archaeopteryx do not count. In his review of Stephen Stanley's book, Macroevolution...
I don't really know what they mean by that at the end with Archaeopteryx not counting. That's very strange. I'm not sure. I don't know. At this time, we really weren't... Well, it was actually right about this time that scientists really confirmed that birds are the descendants of dinosaurs. It kind of was an open question. I'm pretty sure the early 90s is when that was basically... The scientists basically agreed on that.
Evolution D.S. Woodruff said, fossil species remain unchanged throughout most of their history, and the record fails to contain a single example of a significant transition. There aren't any examples. Don't fall for the statement that evolution is a proven fact. It is absolutely not. It is their religion versus my religion. I will quickly admit that what I have is a faith. I cannot prove creation and you cannot prove evolution. If we approach it on the common ground that both ideas are religious, it will make a lot more sense. It is not science versus religion. Don't let them use that phrase when they talk about the controversy of creation versus evolution. It is not science versus religion. It is religion versus religion. Both of them are simply religious beliefs. The effect of these religious beliefs has always been of interest to me.
Man,
If we
he has
teach our kids in
repeated that
public
so
schools that
many
they are merely
times.
animals, then they will act like animals. Me should not be surprised. If we teach
Me should not be surprised. He said we. Oh man, that would have been funny though.
kids in school that they are a creation of God, that God is their creator, and will someday be their judge, we can expect their behavior to be different because of their basic philosophy. The teaching of evolution is important because, number one, it affects our society. Many people down through history in the name of evolution have had some dramatic effects on our society. Adolf Hitler, for instance, was an avid evolutionist.
No, he
In order
wasn't.
to comprehend Hitler's reasoning, one must go back to evolution to understand why he did the things that he did and thought the way he thought. Hitler slaughtered the Jews and hated the blacks because he was an evolutionist. He thought it was his duty to aid evolution in improving the human race.
Oh God.
He taught and believed that each of the different races in the world were actually different species of man, and that it was the job of the superior species, Germany, to annihilate the inferior species. In the name of evolution, Hitler
He never said that that was because of religion or anything, or evolution or anything like that.
closed down the Christian schools in Germany in the early 1930 ECS. He began indoctrinating the people heavily with the idea of the German superior race, saying that because of evolution they had evolved further.
Didn't your God selectively choose a group of people to be the chosen people?
And it was their duty to rule the world. Let me give you a quote here.
Doesn't your God repeatedly say to descendants of Abraham that your descendants will be like the stars and shall rule over the world?
Here, Sir Arthur Keith, in his book Evolution and Ethics, 1947, page 10, said, "The leader of Germany is an evolutionist, not only in theory, but as millions know to their costs, in the rigor of its practice. For him, the national front of Europe is only the evolutionary front. He regards himself, and is regarded as the incarnation of the will of Germany, the purpose of that will being to guide the evolutionary destiny of its people." Hitler was an evolutionist, and it was the crazy doctrine of evolution that is fundamentally responsible for World War II. In Japan, the same thing was going on with the Shinto religion. This teaches that the Japanese people evolved from gods, and it was their destiny to rule the world. Japan and Germany got together, and we had an awful time in World War II. Yes, the controversy and debate of evolution and creation has a tremendous influence on our society.
What kind of
Joseph Stalin
sentence
was
is
another
that?
evolutionist. I quote here from the Impact article, published by the
No, he wasn't. They rounded up and executed evolutionary biologists in the Soviet Union. The famines that the Soviet Union went through were caused mostly by what was his name? The chief biologist for the Soviet Union, I'm blanking on his name. Alexander Lysenko, who had these harebrained, idiotic, unscientific, social, or like communist, I don't even know what to call them. They were like collectivist ideas about plants. He thought if you planted a bunch of different crops or different varieties of the same crop really, really close together, that they would absorb each other's characteristics. Again, this very weird collectivist, but it fit with their political beliefs of the time. And it didn't work at all. And it led to horrible, catastrophic that, and the way that I don't know this super well, but there was all this like serfdom basically that Stalin imposed on all the farmers. He said, no, you're going to do things this way, and because of the way it was actually structured and incentivized, people couldn't grow enough also. But no, Stalin as an evolutionist, that's just so incredibly wrong
Institute for
and
Creation
stupid.
Research in El Cajon, California, October 1987. Impact article #1.
Oh, well, yeah. So he's quoting from somebody from the Institute for Creation Research. Okay. That makes me wonder about those earlier quotes, too. I'm not going to bother looking into them.
172, entitled Stalin's Brutal Faith. One of the men that had a profound impact on Joseph Stalin when he was just a young person was the man Charles Darwin and his book, The Origin of Species. At a very early age, while still a pupil in the ecclesiastical school, Comrade Stalin developed a critical mind and revolutionary sentiments. He began to read Darwin and became an atheist. G. Glurjidze, a friend of Stalin's relics, I began to speak of God. Joseph heard me out, and after a moment of silence he said, "You know, they are fooling us. There is no God." I was astonished at these words. I had never heard anything like it before. "How can you say such things so-so?" I exclaimed. "I'll lend you a book to read. It will show you that the world and all living things are quite different from what you imagined, and you will see that all of this talk about God is sheer nonsense," Joseph said. "What book is that?" I inquired. "Darwin. You must read it," Joseph impressed on me.
I mean, like, the idea that On the Origin of Species is like the atheist Bible, that's really stupid. From what little I'm able to dig up, what I'm basically seeing is there are other sources, a few other sources that tell kind of this same story, but I mean, whatever. We also know for a fact everything I said earlier. They rounded up, executed, and excommunicated and banned evolutionary biologists from the Soviet Union. So, whatever. And this has nothing to do with whether or not evolution is true. The idea that religion has done less harm globally, and I don't mean just all religions, I mean Christianity, the idea that it's done less harm in the world than atheism or whatever, evolutionism or whatever, is just so unbelievably stupid. Even if we would attribute everything that happened in World War II and communist China and communist Russia to atheism and evolution, still it would not be as destructive as historically what Christianity has done to the world.
A few pages later, another individual was reflecting on Stalin's youthful pursuits, and he added the following: "In order to disabuse the minds of our seminary students of the myth that the world was created in 6 days, we had to acquaint ourselves with the geological origin and the age of the Earth and be able to prove them in argument. We had to familiarize ourselves with Darwin's writings. Joseph Stalin, in the name of evolution and to help purify the Russian race, was responsible for killing 60 million of his own people during his reign of terror. We are still digging up mass graves of people that were slaughtered by Stalin. Communism also has its roots in evolution. Let me quote some more here from the Impact article, 172, Stalin's Brutal Faith. As early as December 12, 1859, only 2 months after The Origin of Species was published, Friedrich Engels wrote to Karl Marx, "Darwin, whom I am just now reading, is splendid." About a year later, December 19, 1860, Karl Marx, the father of communism, responded, "During my time of trial these last few weeks, I have read all sorts of things, among others, Darwin's Book of Natural Selection. Although it is developed in the crude English style, this is the book which contains the basis in natural history for our view." To one Ferdinand Lassalle, he wrote on January 16, 1861, "Darwin's book is very important and serves me as the basis in natural science for the class struggle in history." Zirkel that Marx wanted to dedicate Das Kapital to Darwin. Harvard's Stephen Jay Gould, an intense and modern spokesman for evolution, corroborates that he saw Darwin's copy of Marx's first copy inscribed by Marx, describing himself as a sincere admirer of the English naturalist, Darwin. Someone credits Vladimir Lenin with the following commentary on Darwin: "Darwin put an end to the belief that the animal-vegetable species bear no relation to one another except by chance, and that they were created by God and are hence immutable." Communism has its roots in evolution. The effects that evolution
Even if it does, so what?
has had on our society, just with the three that I've mentioned here, Hitler, Stalin, and communism, are incredible. The human lives that have been lost cannot be calculated, nor can the money that has been spent fighting communism and Nazism be calculated. It staggers the imagination to think of the effects that evolution has had on our society. Creation versus evolution is an extremely important discussion and debate. We are setting the trap for young people by teaching them evolution in school. We are destroying our own future by presenting this ridiculous doctrine as a scientific fact. The effect on society alone is tremendous. The philosophy of origins that a person chooses also has an effect on many other decisions he or she makes. The people that are divided on whether they believe that abortion is right or wrong are generally divided into the same groups that form over the issue of creation and evolution. If a person believes that we are a creation of God, then of course abortion is wrong. If a person believes that evolution is true, that we just evolved with blind chance, then abortion would be fine. The abortion
Well, luckily, all you have to do is claim God told me to get an abortion, and you get out of it.
issue really needs to be argued on creation, evolution ground first. The same could be said for many other issues of life like euthanasia, drugs, teen sex, homosexuality, etc. Secondly, I think evolution not only affects our society, it affects our modern science. One of the things that we try to teach students is what is called the scientific method. There are basically 4 steps involved in the scientific method. Observation.
He said he's repeating himself in consecutive sentences now.
Experimentation, classification of data, and conclusion. It is extremely important that scientists learn to use the scientific method, particularly observation and experimentation. They need to learn how to be good scientists. We take our science classes and try to teach them the unobservable thing of evolution. Evolution has never been observed in the present. It has never been observed in the past. There is no record in the fossil record for evolution. There is no observation for this doctrine, and it does not belong in science.
This video would have been an hour shorter if he just didn't say anything more than once.
It is part of a religion. There is no experimentation for evolution. Do an experiment, show me evolution happening. All they have been able to show so far are genetic changes that have been neutral or negative. There has never been an increase in genetic matter or genetic structure.
Yeah, he didn't defend or unpack those ideas at all. He's just been, man, so much of this has been the world's worst history lesson. But no, duplications and mutations of duplicated gene segments. We've known how DNA adds information for so many decades.
We have developed, for instance, through the fruit fly experiment that went for many years. Flies with no eyes, flies with red eyes, flies with rumpled wings, flies with no wings, but never anything but another fly. It was always a fly that was less likely to survive in the wild. How well could a fly that couldn't fly survive? Evolution teaches that things gradually increase.
A fly that couldn't fly could live perfectly fine. It would have a new niche.
And yet there is no experimentation to back it up. No.
Penguins can't fly and they're birds. How well could a bird that can't fly survive? Well, ask a penguin or an ostrich or an emu or a cassowary or a kiwi or, oh man, why can't I think of any other flightless birds? I don't know. There's a bunch of other extinct ones.
No one has ever done one experiment to prove any phase of macroevolution at all. The effect that evolution has on science, I think, is devastating. America is rapidly losing ground in the world market in our science students. We are turning out students that many other countries are able to beat in academic scores and academic knowledge because we waste so much class time and textbook time on this dumb idea of evolution.
No, that's because the United States only has about 4% of the world's population, or 6% of the world's population. Like, of course, we're not always going to be the best, except at winning gold medals.
It cannot be proved. There is no observation. There is no experimentation. It does not belong in the science classroom. It has a tremendous effect on our scientific program. It hinders right thinking. We teach students, hey, you are going to be a scientist. Now only believe what you can observe. But yet we teach them evolution, which we cannot observe.
Nobody says only believe what you can observe.
That is absurd. We waste a tremendous amount of money trying to prove evolution. On the trip to the moon, they were so concerned that there might be some type of bacteria life on the moon. They spent extra money to isolate the moon rocks when they got them in the spacecraft and when they got them back on Earth.
Yep.
They will do the same with all the other planets. They will say, oh, there might be life there. We need to protect those rocks. One of the astronauts offered to eat some of the moon dust on the way back to prove that there was no life on it and that it was perfectly sterile. Bring back a Mars rock or a Jupiter rock, I'll eat it or lick it. There is no life on the other planet. Life doesn't evolve. There is no evidence for evolution, and it wastes a lot of our money because...
Okay, I am glad that I saw that because I've always been wondering, like, if we could find quotes from a long time ago about people just like making predictions, like creationists making predictions based on like, look, like these are like my religious beliefs or whatever, so we will predict that this definitely won't happen. We went over this earlier when Kent made all those predictions that weren't predictions. They were just things we already know. But here's an example. So unfortunately, it's going to be a long time, but we're going to get samples back from Mars. And if there's life there, that will prove that he was wrong. And that'll be a lot of fun. What I've really wanted is, today they look at fossils like Australopithecus, and they just say, well, that's just a different ape. It's not a transitional form or whatever. But it would be really great to dig up some old quotes before we had those of people saying they won't be found, they'll never be found because they don't exist. But then they were found, So it'd be nice to have those people defend those ideas, but they're dead.
Because they've got the wrong thinking. They thought the moon was millions of years old, so they put giant landing pads on the spacecraft. They wasted a lot of money because they thought the cosmic dust would be so deep on the moon. The cosmic dust layer indicated that the moon was only 6,000 or 7,000 years old.
No, it didn't. Yeah, so they didn't know how much erosion had taken place on the moon. So yeah, they did prepare for the regolith to be quite deep. But the idea that
we will discuss this in further detail later in the book.
Oh,
Christians
I doubt
need to stand up for what is right. I believe God's word is the truth, and all real scientific evidence validates it.
So, before we end here, I'm just going to check that. He does talk about the moon a bunch. The moon getting farther away. It takes one proof that the complete refute should be received closer than. Well, you know what? We'll get there when we get there. Maybe he actually. That's funny. Of all the ideas he ever brought up that he didn't actually come back to later, maybe he does it with the moon. So yeah, when we get to the last part, that'll be how old is the Earth? Now, if you saw my video where I broke down his debate that he had, he didn't even try to address the age of the Earth. Or no, that wasn't a debate. It was him giving like a video lecture. Sorry, but in either case, he didn't even try to address it. He just said, according to me, the Big Bang is stupid, so therefore the Earth is not billions of years old. Anyways, I'm not sure when that'll be because I have to wait for my credits to. I have to pay to transcribe this, and I ran out of my quota for the month. So just with the talking I've done for this video, my jaw is like actually in agony for whatever reason. So there's no way I can read this out loud. But anyways, that was awful. And I'll see you next time.